You wake in the night, but your body does not move. Your chest is heavy, breath shallow, limbs paralyzed. Figure crouches at the foot of your bed, faceless, yet staring. The room is silent, but inside your skull, a whisper begins, slow and intimate. I am already inside. You try to scream, but your voice is chained. You try to move, but invisible hands pin you down. And then you feel it, the drain, not of blood, but of essence, as if something is feeding on the marrow of your soul. Doctors call it sleep paralysis. Folklore calls it the night hag. Occultists know it as astral intrusion. For in the twilight between waking and dream, the walls of the body weaken, and the astral plane presses through. Their parasites wait incubi and succubi, whispering hunger, shadow people feeding on fear, astral vampires draining vitality. They are not hallucinations, they are archetypes with teeth. What if the nightmares that haunt you are not illusions, but contracts? What if every recurring fear, every forbidden desire, every unresolved wound is doorway wide open? The astral does not invent monsters, it mirrors you.
Ow.
And what you refuse to face in light becomes predator in dark. So ask yourself, when your eyes close tonight, who will be waiting on the threshold? When they reach for you, will you recognize them as demons or as fragments of yourself? Evil does not arise from chaos. It emerges from structure. The astral plane is not a dreamscape of random images, it is architecture. Geometry woven from thought, desire, memory, and trauma. Occultists across centuries, Blavatsky, Steiner, Ion Fortune spoke of it not as fantasy, but as a blueprint, a place where consciousness crystallizes into form. It is here that parasites dwell, not because they were imagined, but because the architecture itself requires occupants.
Imagine the astral
As a cathedral of mirrors, every thought reverberates, reflecting until it hardens into image. Every desire etches itself into walls. Every wound bleeds into corridors. Over time, patterns accumulate, forming structures as real as stone. Shadow people are not figments. They are corridors of fear given flesh. Incubi and succubi are chambers built from suppressed lust. Astral vampires are vaults of hunger, endless hallways siphoning essence. None of these are accidents. They're tenants in architecture you helped design. Cult grimoires hinted at this. Grippa describes spheres layered like shells, each governed by laws. Levi drew diagrams of astral light, a medium more binding than air. Fortune warned that thought forms once created behave like autonomous creatures. What she called elementals are not illusions, but bricks of construction. A single obsession repeated becomes wall. A trauma rehearsed becomes tower. A fear fed nightly becomes gate. Entities pass through not because they break in, but because the architecture invited them. Sensory fragments reveal this design. Think of the paralysis where ceiling bends into dome. Shadows elongate like pillars. Whispers echo as if from choir. You're not hallucinating. You are perceiving architecture flexing around you. Your bed becomes altar, your breath becomes chant, your silence becomes circle. You lie captive inside temple you did not know you built. Dante's Inferno mapped hell as 9 circles, each tailored to sin, each geometry punishing by design. The astral mirrors this logic, but with cruel intimacy. Here the circles are not cosmic, they are personal. One man's wrath becomes swamp he sinks in. Another's betrayal becomes ice where he is frozen. Your unresolved grief builds chamber where shadows gather. Your addictions carve tunnels where parasites feed. The astral is not random torment. It is bespoke architecture, a hell written by your own hand, and yet it is also systemic. Just as Vatican walls encode ritual, the astral encodes pattern. Collective fear builds entire districts, wars plagues despair. Entities swarm there like carrion. Collective lust constructs arenas where incubi feed. Collective obsession builds towers of light that glitter but drain. Step into astral unshielded, and you walk not in private nightmare, but in metropolis of thought, a labyrinth pulsing with billions of echoes. This is why parasites thrive. They are not invaders, they are residents. The architecture sustains them. Your nightmares are their banquet hall, your rituals their lifeline. You may laugh at folklore of night hags, yet architecture explains why they recur across cultures. Every tribe, every century, saw the same figure, because the geometry is the same. Where fear builds, shadow stands. Where lust surges, succubus waits. Where despair lingers, vampire feeds. Different names, same rooms, same tenants. Occultists warn. Architecture does not vanish when you wake. Just as a grimoire circle remains after chalk fades, the astral structure endures after dream ends. Every night you return, walking corridors older than memory, repeating rituals you did not choose. Each whisper you ignore strengthens wall. Each fear you repress adds stone. Each desire you shame feeds parasite. Still you wonder why they return. Sensory images betray their permanence. Scratch marks on skin that vanish by dawn but ache all day. Breath cold as if wind passed through sealed room. Glowing in corner, though no figure stands. These are not delusions, they are bleed through. Cracks where astral architecture presses against waking world. So the architecture of evil is not distant hell, nor hidden Vaticanate is inside. A geometry that mirrors psyche, powered by repetition, sustained by ignorance. You cannot banish what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot collapse what you continue to build. Awareness is demolition, but silence is cement. This is why the ancients feared the dweller on the threshold. It is not enemy, it is keystone. The ultimate structure that bars entry to higher realms is your own unclaimed shadow, embodied in form. Until you face it, you remain prisoner in architecture of your own design, haunted by parasites who feed not on you, but on what you refuse to confront. So ask yourself, what corridors have you built in silence? What chambers echo with your shame? What gates stand open to entities you deny by day, but kneel before at night? The architecture stands, whether or not you believe. The only question is, will you awaken inside it, or continue to serve as its silent architect? Symbols do not merely represent, they summon. The astral plane, more than any cathedral or grimoire, is written entirely in symbolic language. Every thought, every desire, every trauma carves a glyph in its walls. Every entity you meet is more than monster, it is a sigil brought to life, a living archetype pulsing with your own energy. To dismiss them as hallucinations is to miss their function. They are not illusions, they are codes. Consider the incubus and succubus. For centuries whispered in folklore, painted crouching on chests of the sleeping, blamed for unwanted lust or nocturnal visions. But beyond superstition, they are living symbols of an unclaimed desire. Their presence is not accident but condensation. Every suppressed longing, every shamed impulse, gathers until it births form. The incubus is lust inverted into nightmare. The succubus is desire twisted into parasite. They are sigils drawn not in ink, but in sweat and secrecy. And once formed, they fed not because they are evil, but because that is their code. Then the astral vampire. Legends speak of pale figures drinking blood, but in astral truth, they drink essence. Fatigue after dream, depression without cause, thoughts not your own, these are their feeding. But vampire is symbol older than story. It is hunger without end, desire that cannot be satisfied. To dream of a vampire is to glimpse your own consumption, cycles that drain but never nourish. They appear as monsters, but they are sigils warning of imbalance. Shadow people are perhaps the clearest glyph. Dark silhouettes standing at bedside, faceless yet watching. They terrify because they reflect. Each shadow is thought exiled, trauma buried, anger denied. They are mirrors walking. The less you own them, the stronger they appear. They are not random hallucination, they are signatures, each curve of their outline shaped by your repression. That is why they appear across cultures. Every psyche buries shadow, every shadow stands eventually at the threshold. And then the most dreaded, the dweller on the threshold. Occultists described it as final guardian, terrifying figure barring entry to higher planes. Yet it is not external, it is keystone symbol. The dweller is every unresolved piece of self, woven into singular form. To see it is to face archive of fear, to banish it is to claim sovereignty. It is ultimate sigil, alive, demanding integration. To flee is to remain prisoner, to face is to awaken. Sensory fragments betray the symbolic logic, whisper repeating same phrase night after night, as if line of chant. A claw mark spelling out letters across skin, only to fade by dawn. A mirror fogging into glyphs unlearned yet known. The entities speak in language not of words, but of symbol shapes that bypass intellect, carving directly into subconscious. That is why they haunt. That is why they endure. Dante understood this when he clothed each sin in image. Lust as storm, gluttony as filth, betrayal as ice. He did not argue, he inscribed. The astral does the same. It does not speak logic, it speaks in archetypes. Your desire becomes succubus, your hunger becomes vampire, your fear becomes shadow, your threshold becomes dweller. Each is sigil, functioning as mirror, warning, and gatekeeper. Modern life echoes the same language. Logos function as sigils. Advertisements feed on lust and hunger, birthing succubi in digital form. Social media shadows feed on rage. Avatars faceless, outlines blurred. Even memes act as thought forms, spreading symbols that bypass reason, embedding into psyche. The astral is not elsewhere, is bled into your feed, your screens, your rituals of repetition. The entities evolve, but their code remains. Occultists warn. Symbols once alive cling. A sigil drawn in grimoire demands banishing. A thought form birthed in astral demands acknowledgement. Ignore it, and it feeds anyway. Deny it, and it grows. The faithful think prayer dismisses them, but prayer itself is symbol, and often the same code repeated. To break cycle requires authorship naming symbol, claiming it, rewriting its charge. Otherwise, the language speaks you instead of you speaking it. So ask yourself, which symbols are you already carrying? Which glyphs are etched in your shadow, fed daily by your attention, your fear, your desire? When you wake to silhouette at bedside, do you curse the demon or? Do you recognize the sigil of yourself? The astral does not lie. It cannot. It only translates. The language of symbols is merciless, but also liberating, for once you read it, you can write it. Once you see entity as archetype, you can dissolve or integrate. The parasite becomes mirror, and the mirror becomes key. Before gold gleamed, before ink dried on parchment contracts, there was blood. The oldest covenant, the first offering, the universal language of exchange. In grimoires, it drips on altars. In folklore, it stains sheets. In modern occult, it translates into vitality, sleep, attention, essence. Astral parasites feed not because they are wicked, but because blood, whether literal or subtle, remains the oldest currency of power. Legends of incubi and succubi always return to this exchange. Victims awoke, exhausted, their bodies aching, sometimes marked with scratches or bruises. Physicians dismissed it as hysteria, yet the patterns repeat. Drained vitality, restless nights, hollow eyes by dawn. Desire itself becomes currency. Each dream encounter is transaction you do not remember giving. Yet the parasite collects. Blood flows unseen, measured in lost energy. The astral vampire makes it clearer. Unlike their folkloric cousins with fangs, these drink directly from aura. They feed on prana chi, the life force occultists equate with blood. Symptoms are unmistakable. Fatigued with no cause, intrusive melancholy, sudden despair, strange weight pressing down on chest. Some traditions describe waking with taste of iron in mouth, as if blood echoed in subtle body. What drains in astral translates to body as weakness. The vampire does not need fang. Your own essence becomes chalice. Folklore of the night hag in Europe, the kanashibari in Japan, the pisadera in Brazil, it describes the same dynamic. A presence presses on chest, paralyzes, leaves victim gasping, heart pounding as if bled dry. These are not coincidences across continents. They are testimonies of astral transactions. Every culture recognized that something fed, and that blood, literal or invisible, was price. Dante hinted the same in his Inferno. The violent submerged in river of boiling blood, eternally drowning in what they spilled. The suicides transformed into bleeding trees, their essence drained when branches torn. Blood is punishment, but also proof of debt unpaid. Even hell recognizes blood as accounting. Modern life masks it, but the ritual endures. Hours bled into screens, emotions harvested by algorithms, sleep stolen by endless stimulation. Each drop of attention becomes blood spilled. Entities may not lurk in corners, but systems function like astral parasites, drinking essence silently. fatigue of doom scrolling, emptiness after binge, despair after outrage, these are blood offerings disguised. The altar is digital, but sacrifice remains. Sensory fragments betray the truth. The ache in bones after vivid dream, as if marrow scraped clean. The cold sweat-staining sheets echo of phantom embrace, sudden nosebleed after nightmare. The heaviness of limbs as if veins emptied. These are receipts. You may not see chalice, but you feel transaction. Cultists warned, energy is not metaphor. Vitality is substance, as real as blood and vein. Astral beings feed because architecture allows it. Blood is essence, essence is blood. To dream unshielded is to offer without awareness. To repress desire is to leak unconsciously. To fear shadow is to drip vitality like wound. The parasite need not attack. It waits by the crack and drinks what spills. But here lies the paradox. Blood given consciously transforms. Sacrifice chosen becomes empowerment. Ritual cuts, offerings, ascetic practices, all were attempts to claim authorship of blood. Better to bleed on altar by choice than to bleed in sleep unaware. The ancients knew, you cannot escape price, can only choose altar. So ask yourself, how much blood have you already spent unknowingly? How many nights left you drained? How many days fogged by exhaustion that medicine cannot cure? Which desires denied now creep back as succubi? Which fears silenced now stand as shadow at bed's edge? You have paid in blood whether or not you meant to. The ledger is written not in ink, but in your own pulse. And still, the astral waits. Parasites thrive not on belief but on payment. The question is never if you will pay. The question is, do you bleed unconsciously into hands unseen, or do you choose where your blood flows? Every haunting is a contract. It's not always written in ink, not always signed in blood, but still binding. The astral plane does not wait for your formal consent. Every repeated thought, every obsessive ritual of desire or fear is a signature. Every cycle rehearsed becomes covenant. The parasites do not break into your chamber, they enter through clauses you authored without knowing. Think of the succubus. She does not appear because demon forced her way. She comes because desire, repressed and repeated, summoned her like beacon. Each secret thought, each shamed impulse whispered to void, became line and pact, till finally she arrives, not a stranger, but as contract fulfilled. She feeds not because she chooses, but because you signed. The incubus too is claws. Victims who felt pressure on chest, dream turning into violation, energy drained they did not invite explicitly. But obsession written daily, guilt repeated nightly, became pact. Tension is currency. Attention repeated is contract. What you gaze upon, even in secrecy, binds you to feeding. Astral vampires are subtler still. They feed on despair, on exhaustion rehearsed day after day. Depression becomes pact, thought repeated like liturgy. I am worthless. I am tired. I cannot escape. Each phrase is clause. Each sigh is signature. The vampire does not need fang when you renew covenant every dawn. Shadow people thrive in the same way. They stand in doorway because trauma never faced leaves opening. Each night of silence, each refusal to speak truth, each memory repressed is agreement. They wait because you allow them space. They return because you sign again by ignoring. The pact is not malicious, it is automatic. Silence itself is consent. Occultists warned of this. Dion Fortune wrote that elementals fed on vital leaks of mind, not willful invocation. Blavatsky described thought forms clinging like parasites, obeying resonance. Malachi Martin, though writing of Vatican, hinted the same law. Ritual repeated, knowingly or not, is pact binding. The astral is legalistic, enforces its contracts without mercy. Sensory fragments reveal it. It's the whisper that grows louder each time you think forbidden thought, until it no longer sounds like your voice. The dream that repeats nightly, each time more invasive, as if clauses deepen. The mirror where your own eyes blink but whisper words you did not think. These are signatures. You did not notice when you signed, but the astral noticed. Dante knew contracts were eternal. His traitors frozen in ice are not punished randomly. They are bound to oath broken. Judas sold with silver, Brutus betrayed for Rome, Cassius struck in pact inverted. Their fate was not fire, but enforcement. Hell is not chaos. Hell is contract. The astral mirrors this. Once pact is formed, it enforces, even if you forget. Modern life offers its own grimoires of pact. Addiction to screen, ritual of scrolling at midnight, repeated feeding of lust or rage, each his clause. Algorithms are priests, recording every click as oath. Corporations harvest essence as vampires, contracts buried in terms of service you never read. You sign with silence, with repetition, with gaze. The astral does not care if pact is digital or spiritual. Signature is attention, and you already pay. But here lies paradox. Contract, though binding, is also opportunity. For just as you can sign unconsciously, you can sign consciously. The magician knows this. To bargain is not always curse. To engage with demon deliberately is pact of power. Faust fell not because he signed, but because he signed blindly. The awaken, choose, alter, read clauses, dictate terms. Even succubus becomes ally when recognized as desire claimed rather than denied. Even vampire becomes mirror when hunger is integrated instead of hidden. The astral enforces, but it does not deceive. Signature is always yours. The choice is always yours. Deny it, and you feed blindly. Own it, and you reclaim sovereignty. Awareness itself becomes clause rewritten. To see contract is to hold quill again. Ask yourself, what contracts have you already signed? Which obsessions repeat nightly? Which fears you feed daily? Which silences echo as agreement? You wonder why parasites return? But look closer. The ink is still wet. The clauses are still alive. And the signature, every time, is yours. The most efficient prison is not built of stone. It is carved into the mind. Teach a soul to fear its own hunger, to hate its own desire, to silence its own anger, and you need no chains. They will chain themselves. This is the inverted moral code, the great inversion whispered across pulpits, classrooms, and cultures. It is not that demons lurk outside waiting to devour. It is that you have been trained to exile parts of yourself until they return in astral form, cloaked, distorted, predatory.
I have a toy.
Take desire. In its raw state, it is compassit, draws you toward creation, intimacy, life. Yet society branded it lust, sin, danger. The faithful were taught to suppress it, to confess it, to shame it. But what is buried does not die. On the astral plane, suppressed desire coagulates, condenses, and eventually manifests as succubus. You did not escape lust, you created its parasite. You named it demon, but it was only desire abandoned, forced to feed in shadows. Consider ambition. It is drive force that builds civilizations, vision that lifts generations. Yet ambition inverted becomes greed, pride, arrogance. The moral code twisted it into shame. And so, in the astral, abandoned ambition transforms into vampire hunger without end. Drive unclaimed, becoming predator. What could have been sovereignty becomes parasite, because you were taught that wanting was wrong. Even fear has purpose, warning, protection, primal awareness. But you are told fear is weakness. Repress it, deny it, laugh at it. In astral architecture, denied fear becomes shadow people, figures faceless and watching. They terrify not because they are alien, but because they are yours. Every shadow is piece of psyche branded unholy, every silhouette an echo of what you refuse to own. And then the dweller on the threshold, most feared of all. It is not enemy from outside, is totality of inversion, keystone of repression. All that you denied gathers there, stitched into monstrous guardian, barring passage. It is your rage, your grief, your lust, your ambition, every fragment turned against you. The dweller stands not because it hates, but because you cannot ascend while half of yourself lies in exile. It is not punishment, it is law. Sensory fragments expose the cruelty of inversion, the shame that burns your cheeks when desire stirs, the ache in chest when ambition rises but is smothered, the panic when shadow flickers in mirror, the paralysis when dweller appears in dream, eyes gleaming with your own. These are not attacks, they're reflections of code inverted, turned back upon its source. Dante painted the same theater, lustful whipped by endless winds. Not because desire was evil, but because denied, it became chaos. Gluttons drowning in filth not, because hunger was sin, but because unchanneled it rotted. Traitors frozen, not because choice was wrong, but because silence calcified into ice. Each punishment is inversion made eternal. Hell is not external, it is psyche inverted, ritualized, crystallized. The Vatican, the Church, the system each preach the same spell. Obedience as virtue, rebellion as sin, silence as holiness. The result? Entire populations taught to exile their sovereignty, their hunger, their fire. The astral swelled with parasites, entities feeding on humanity's own abandoned strength. And so the faithful prayed for protection from demons they themselves birthed. Modern culture continues the inversion. Desires sold as addiction, ambition disguised as greed, fear weaponized as entertainment, rebellion mocked as insanity. Each archetype twisted, suppressed, or commodified, each inversion adds stone to architecture. Each shadow grows taller. Parasites do not need to invade. We deliver ourselves to them by living the inverted code. Occultists whisper the antidote. Integration. To face succubus is to reclaim desire as sacred. To confront vampire is to own hunger as vision. To acknowledge shadow is to embrace fear as ally. To meet dweller is to bow before yourself, entire and unashamed. Inversion dissolves when recognition dawns. The parasite shrivels when its host claims authorship. But until then, inversion rules. And every night you close eyes, every time you silence hunger, every moment you obey code that calls sovereignty sinew, write contract anew, the parasites arrive faithfully, not as enemies, but as enforcers of law you accepted. So ask yourself, which parts of your soul have been inverted into chains? Which desires wear mask of demon? Which shadows still lurk because you refuse to name them? Till you answer, you remain prisoner of inversion, and the astral will keep feeding. When you hear the word ritual, you imagine cloaked figures chanting over candles, smoke rising from blood-stained altars. But the most binding rituals are not performed in secret chambers. They are performed by you, daily, without awareness. The astral does not require incense or scripture. It requires repetition. Every thought rehearsed, every emotion looped, every action charged with attention becomes liturgy. And parasites thrive because you are already priest of rituals you do not know you perform. Think of the scroll, midnight, phone glowing like black mirror, your fingers sliding endlessly downward. Each image triggers lust, envy, rage. Each reaction is offering. The repetition is chant, the glowing screen altar, the algorithm demon recording devotion. You call it routine. The astral calls it ritual. As you scroll, entities feed incubi on lust, vampires on exhaustion, shadows on despair. Think of obsession, play of argument in head, words rehearsed until veins burn. That loop is incantation, anger vibrating into astral corridors, feeding thought forms like storm. Each time you repeat story, you carve deeper groove, strengthening parasite that drinks wrath. It does not matter if you whisper aloud or only in mind. The ritual is complete. Think of silence, trauma buried, grief swallowed, fear denied. Every night you avoid memory, you rehearse a ritual of shadow. Each silence is offering. Each refusal to speak is vow renewed. Shadow people appear because you summon them with every word you do not say. The ritual is not dramatic. It is absence repeated, silence chanted. Folklore knew this. In Europe, charms placed on chest before sleep, iron knives laid across body defenses against nightly rituals of paralysis. In Africa, mirrors covered to prevent spirits crossing threshold. In Asia, stones placed at door to block shadow from entry. Each custom was recognition. The nightly cycle itself was ritual, requiring counter-ritual to disrupt. They did not see accidents, they saw ceremonies. Modern culture ridicules this, but the rituals persist. Pornography addiction reenacts succubus pact nightly, liturgy of lust. Doom-scrolling fuels vampire, liturgy of fatigue. Repressed ambition channeled into endless consumption fuels, parasite of hunger. Even entertainment mimics ritual chanting songs in stadium, screaming in outrage online, kneeling to celebrity icons. Parasites do not distinguish between church and screen. Repetition is worship, no matter altar. Sensory fragments reveal the truth. the glow of phone screen illuminating face like candle in dark chapel, the hum of refrigerator at 3 a.m. echoing like drone chant in monastery, the silence of scrolling punctuated only by breath, heartbeat like drum, the trance you slip into as time vanishes. These are ceremonies, and you are officiant. Occultist warned. Every action is spell when repeated. Every habit is invocation. Every belief is contract rehearsed. The faithful thought demons appeared from nowhere. In truth, they were called fed, strengthened daily by unconscious rituals. The parasite is not intruder. It is priest fed by congregation of billions who never knew they were worshipping. Dante depicted this in eternal cycles. The lustful blown forever, the gluttonous drowning endlessly, the wrathful striking eternally. These are not punishments. They are rituals calcified. The damned are not chained. They are priests repeating liturgy they authored in life. Hell is not chaos. Hell is ritual everywhere, eternal, unbroken. And so it is here. When you wake exhausted, it is not random, it is because ritual drained you. When you feel shadow at night, it is not attacked, it is contract rehearsed. When you despair after endless loops of thought, it is not coincidence, it is liturgy feeding parasite. Rituals are everywhere because you are ritual, yet awareness cracks the cycle. The moment you name action as ritual, you shift from pawn to priest aware. The chant loses grip when recognized. The altar collapses when you choose. Parasites starve when ritual broken. You cannot escape ceremony, but you can author it. Ritual everywhere, but sovereignty dictates which rituals endure. So ask yourself, what rituals did you perform today without knowing? What chants did you repeat? What offerings did you give? What altars did you kneel at? And more terrifying, who in the astral was waiting to receive them? Awakening is not thunder, it is fracture. A crack in dream, a glimpse behind curtain, the sudden realization that nothing was random, that every whisper, every shadow, every draining night was part of a structure. You're not only haunted by rituals, you are ritual. Your body, your breath, your thoughts have been altered all along. The astral did not invade, you performed it. Look closely. The beat of your heart is drum, your inhale and exhale chant. Every cycle of sleep is procession into temple. Every dream corridor architecture shaped by your own hand. Parasites feed because you already preside as priest, offering essence without knowing. The greatest inversion was never that demons attacked it, was that you forgot you were officiating your own ceremony. The moment awareness arrives, the spell cracks. A shadow at your bedside is no longer predator, is mirror. The succubus, no longer temptation, it is compass pointing to desire unclaimed. The vampire, no longer predator, is hunger twisted by denial. Even the dweller, terrifying gatekeeper, reveals itself not as jailer but as keystone. Awareness shifts dynamic. The parasite cannot bind once you name ritual. The contract cannot enslave once you see signature. The dweller bows when recognized as yourself. Sensory fragments of awakening arrive slowly. The next time you wake paralyzed, instead of panic, you breathe with rhythm, turning paralysis into stillness, stillness into meditation. The shadow leans closer, but you do not recoil. You whisper its name, fear, grief, lest stand. It trembles. The succubus presses near, but instead of denial, you acknowledge desire without shame. Her form dissolves into smoke. The dweller steps forth, eyes blazing, but when you do not flee, its shape fractures, revealing your own reflection, radiant, whole. Awakening is not escape from astral. It is authorship within it. You do not dismantle architecture, you claim it. You do not silence ritual, rewrite it. To chant consciously is shield. To breathe with awareness is banishing. To claim shadow is integration. The system remains, but you no longer serve blindly. You officiate deliberately. Dante hinted at this hidden liberation. His pilgrim did not remain in hell. He descended, recognized, and ascended, each circle mirror, each punishment teaching. The damned repeated unaware. The pilgrim observed aware. That was the difference. Awareness turned prison into passage. The same choice stands before you. You're already in cycles. The question is whether you repeat unconscious or awaken within. Modern echoes confirm it. Lucid dreamers learn to shift paralysis into flight, nightmares into portals. Psychologists teach shadow work, naming suppressed archetypes until they lose predatory form. Mystics practice conscious ritual, using breath, sigil, mantra, not to drain but to empower. Each is awakening in practice. The astral remains, but sovereignty returns. But awakening carries terror. For once you see, you cannot unsee. The phone screen glows not as toy, but as altar. The thought repeated is no longer innocent, but clause signed. The fatigue after obsession is receipt of offering given. To awaken is to see contract in every silence, ritual in every act. It is liberation, but it is burden. Ignorance was blindness. Awareness is responsibility. And yet within terror lies empowerment. Because the architecture you once built unconsciously, you can now design. The parasites that fed in dark can dissolve into allies when integrated. The dweller becomes threshold into higher planes when faced. The very rituals that drained become rituals that awaken. System does not vanish, but you awaken as its author, not its pawn. So the whisper lingers. You were the ritual all along. Every cycle, every breath, every dream corridor was invocation. The parasite was never enemiate, was mirror. The dweller was never jailer, was guide. Awakening means finally reclaiming authorship of liturgy written in your veins. And once you claim it, the system cannot enslave. The astral waits still, corridors humming, shadows shifting. But awakened, you step into them, not as victim, not as prey, not as blind worshiper. You step as magician, sovereign, officiant of your own ceremony. You cannot end ritual, but you can choose altar. So ask yourself, now that you see, will you continue offering blindly into dark, or will you reclaim the quill, the chant, the breath, and awaken as author of your own astral liturgy? The astral waits each time you close your eyes. Shadows stir, contracts whisper, and the dweller watches. You cannot escape ritual, but you can awaken inside it. Comment your thoughts, subscribe, and prepare. The next descent leads deeper into forbidden alchemy and the transformation of the soul.